So yeah, I'm an instructor at the Iron Yard. I help normal people become developers. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of stressful and difficult, but actually a lot of fun. So we have classes. They're 12 weeks long. They're meant for people who either have a little bit of, they've been fiddling around in development, or they really haven't done a whole lot and they want to get into it. It's really meant for them. If you are a working programmer, it is most certainly not meant for you. You would be totally bored in my class, I'm sure. So anyway, if anybody wants to know about the Iron Yard or anything, you can come talk to me. I'm, of course, here to talk about the Chrome Developer Tools. So let's dig into it. There is a little source code, and I will make it available. Mostly, we're just going to be exploring the Chrome Dev Tools. And so there's not a whole lot of source code there because I didn't write Chrome Dev Tools and can't really give that to you. And so I have a very long list of things, actually, to talk about. And because I knew I would forget about the things that I wanted to talk about, I actually printed them out. So let me get my list, because I would hate to forget things. And put this up here. All right, so if you see me looking at my list of 30-odd things, it's just so I don't forget something and leave it behind, because some of this stuff is really interesting. Okay, so the Chrome Developer Tools. These are some of, one of the essential tools as a web developer. Outside of the text editor and the browser itself, this is what I use the most whenever I'm doing development. I have this thing open all the time. As you can see, I have a beautiful website here to show you at least a few of the concepts. But like I said, I'll give you this, but except for the console improvements section, I don't think there's going to be anything here in terms of source code that you want to look at. Now, I know some of you are full-time programmers. Some of you I know are not. And so some of this stuff, if you're a full-time programmer, you'll go, yes, I know what a stack trace is. But for those who don't, I will actually be going through and discussing some of these fundamental concepts. So just hang tight. I gave this presentation to a long-time web developer the other day, and I asked him if there was anything he hadn't seen before. He said yes, so I'm like, yes, okay, cool. There should be something here for everybody, even if for those who are very experienced in web development, it might not be as much as the others. So first of all, in terms of fundamental concepts, one thing that's different about, or one thing that's important about these tools, which you can get to by either inspecting something on the page, or coming in here and saying, okay, where are they? More tools, developer tools, or how I do it, Command-Alt-I. One of the big things about this tool is really running what's in the page right now, not what was downloaded. All right, so this is the first important distinction. As you probably all know, you can view page source. And what page source is what was downloaded from the server. That's not what you're actually looking at when you look at the Chrome Dev Tools. You're not looking at what was downloaded, you're looking at what is live. And so if we go and look at some of the DOM stuff, if we view page source, we can see this says right here, if we can look at it, where is it? Click me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and click it, all right? And that is a breakpoint, which we'll come to in a minute. And I have changed it. If I view page source, it still says click me, even though I've changed it, okay? Different than with the developer tools. If you go to the developer tools, you can see in here that it does say changed. So that's the first important thing you need to understand. Now in terms of inspect, what the inspect lets you do is go from the visual thing on the page, like how did they do this in the page, and let you go actually to the HTML. One site we're going to visit a lot tonight is Amazon. So if you're looking on Amazon and you want to see some of the stuff that they did, you can actually use the inspect. So let me find let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, let's refresh. They've got a number of carousels on here. Usually if you see something that's like sticking out right here, that's what this is. This is a carousel. If you want to see how this thing works, this is where the inspect comes in. So we can right-click on that, inspect it, and this will show us in the developer tools a little bit of view into what's going on. And so as we highlight things here, which I bet you've seen if you've ever done any, hi, welcome. If you've ever done any stuff with the Chrome Developer Tools, as you highlight things here, you will be able to highlight them up there, so you'll be able to see them, which is awfully, awfully handy. Now the Chrome Developer Tools, one thing they also do is they will highlight any changes. Notice here as I scroll, watch this part of the tools, all right? So I'm moving, you can see the flashing. Anytime there's live DOM manipulation, the Chrome Developer Tools will flash everything is changing. So even here, they're not just using the hover pseudo attribute when it's talking about whenever you hover things. Sometimes they're actually coming in here and changing CSS and adding CSS classes and whatnot. See this hovering right here? All of that is something that you can see in the Chrome Dev Tools with the flashing. It's kind of nice. And in terms of the carousel, we can see that they've implemented the carousel by positioning this element that holds all of these pictures absolutely, or at least either relatively or absolutely here within its parent. And all they're doing is they're changing the left attribute here, as you can see. If you want to move everything this way, or from your perspective this way, they move the left to a negative number. And they move it over time, and you can see that because of the highlighting in the Dev Tools. Now, if you want to, you can, instead of being up here and inspecting down here, you can actually go the other way where you can click on that, and then you can find it and show it there. My students don't seem to like that the best. I can go either way. Other fun things you can do here in the Elements Inspector, here in the Chrome Dev Tools. And if I didn't say this before, and I don't think I did, all this stuff is already installed. And so if you just have Chrome, it's already built in. This isn't anything you have to download Chrome. So if you want to, you can delete things. And this, of course, doesn't delete the things in the actual web page, at least on the server, right? Because you don't have access to this. This is deleting your local copy that you've actually downloaded from the internet and is rendered on your page. So if we refresh that, that will be there. I actually do find this incredibly useful, though. Here I have a very simple example of why I find this useful, even though it doesn't look too interesting. I find this useful because if I just do a little gentle scroll left to right, I can see a horizontal scroll bar. Now, if you do a lot of layout on the web, you've probably accidentally created horizontal scroll bars when you don't want them. And this generally comes because you've made something on the page more than 100% of the width of the page. Has anybody ever done that? Yeah. So sometimes that's easy to track down, sometimes it's not. When I can't just visually find it, my favorite tool for doing this is actually this rather brute force technique. I know which one it is, but I'm going to grab this one right here and I'm going to say, okay, here's the fourth one. I'm going to delete that element out of the page. Does it still scrolls? Okay, I'm going to go delete this one out of the page. Well, I can just go right here. And does it still scroll? No. Sweet. It's kind of silly and kind of lame, but it actually works really well. And sometimes I find that to be really, really useful for me. Another thing you can do is you can change things live on the page. If we go back to Amazon and we want to say, what would this look like if this text was a little different? You can go in and you can just change the text. Hello, my name is Eric. You know, it's the same thing with deleting. This isn't actually changing on the server. This is just changing in here, and I can see how that works out well. And no, I love that text, and so I can change my stuff on the server if I ultimately want to. Now, this can also be really good for a joke. So let's say you go to somebody's Twitter account. I'm going to go to my friend's Twitter account here. I can go to, let's see, one where he did just some text. Here we go. I can go in here. I can inspect this and say, let's see, get rid of that anchor tag that he's got in there. I don't want that. And I can go in here and I can change this text and say, Eric is the coolest person in the world. All right? That's cool. Now I can screenshot that and put that all over the internet, and everybody will think that Amir thinks I'm great. And I don't even need Photoshop. Now that's fairly useless, but it is something that you can do. Oh, by the way, if you ever need bacon Ipsum, there's that. We won't be bacon Ipsoning tonight. All right, that's the basics of the element inspector. We're going to come back to it in a minute whenever we look at doing breakpoints. So if you ever want to know if something's disappearing on the page sometime, you ever want to know why it gets removed. But we'll get back to that when we get to debugging. Let's talk a little bit about CSS. Now this is another one of the basics, but very, very useful things about the Chrome Developer Tools. Let's go back to Amazon. Anytime you click on an element, all right, you can see all the styles that are applied to that element. And one thing that's super duper useful about that is you can see them really from bottom up. And so what we have here are really the last styles applied. If you want, you can go scroll down to the bottom. You can see things that are, for example, just inherited from the HTML element and built in. The strike through says that, well, these things aren't actually being applied because something above them is overriding them. And so you can look through here and find things like that. Like, for example, right here, margin bottom 22 pixels. That's struck out. Something must be overriding it, and it's actually right here. Now, if you haven't noticed, you can also toggle things off. So now if I toggle off this thing that overrides it, the other one will actually kick in, and you can see the difference in the two if there is a visual difference. If you want to, you can just start taking off all sorts of styles and seeing how things look. This can be really useful. If you want to see, for example, I've got this element on the page and this element on the page, and where's that extra margin coming from, or where's this extra padding, or something like that, you can start just selectively toggling off things. And of course, this doesn't change it permanently. This is just changing it on the page as you're looking at it. If you refresh, everything's going to be back anyway. All right? So it's non-destructive, so that's good. This is a great debugging tool when you're going through and trying to figure out, for example, why you're having a bug or how someone else did their styling. I tell my students all the time, hey, one of the best ways of learning from the web is going to something and going, hey, that looks cool, I wonder how they did it, and then go inspect it and look at the CSS and just kind of go figure it out. Because a lot of the time you can do that, and that's super duper nice. And so that's where this can be really helpful. This can also be helpful when you're having CSS specificity issues. And so if I go over here and I have a CSS specificity issue, let's see, actually it's not on this one, but it is totally on this one. All right, so let's say I wrote some CSS. And let's pretend I have a really large CSS file. And I tried to put a border, solid 1 pixel red, on my container class, all right? And so here's my container class, and I'm like, where's my style? This is where these tools can be super useful. I see here, aha, I did in fact put my border solid 1 pixel red style rule, but it's not working. And I can see actually it's overwriting it. And does anybody know why this isn't being applied and this one is?
Well, that container is more specific to.
That's right. In general, in CSS, what comes first will be what comes next. However, excuse me, what comes second will be what comes first. However, if something is more specific, that's a more important rule, then the whole last beats first. So in this case, containers within the body is in fact more specific than container. So this wins. And I can see that from the dev tools just by seeing this, because it orders it the way that it's being applied to the page. Which is cool, because then I can say, well, what happens if I take that off? Well, then I can see my border. Okay? Great, great CSS debugging tool. All right? So that's this right here. And of course, if you uncheck it here, you see it's struck out. And that's the Chrome DevTools way of telling you, hey, I got rid of that. And here I'm going to remove the padding, and that makes all that space between the border and the text disappear. Okay? Let's see, what else about CSS? One thing that's very useful is you can force hover states and other things like that. So this is a fun site. I've met some of these people. They're very nice. So if you want to mimic something like this, because this is a pretty nice effect. This is a hover styling. Whenever you hover over this or that or whatnot, if you want to mimic that, you can, of course, inspect things. And sometimes it's kind of annoying because you're like, I want to hover that, okay, and then you move down here and that's no longer hovering. And that is kind of irritating. So what I can do is I can actually go over here, and then I can go to right here, the toggle element state, and I can force it to stay hovered. Okay? It's pretty handy. Or I could do focus or active or visited, like for the links or something. So you can force these states, and then you'll see them down here applied in the CSS. So that's what's that?
How did you get there? Was that hub always there?
Yes. It may be new, but it is always there. Here's something for element classes. I'm not sure what that is other than just looking at classes, so I can't really tell you on that. But this I have rarely found useful, but it is useful whenever you need it. Let's see. Yes, one thing that's super cool. Let's go back here. Let's say I want to do some tweaking to this incredibly beautiful page, and I don't want to go to my source code, make the tweaks, and then refresh the page and see, and then go source code, make the tweaks and whatnot. I can go in here and I can actually make some changes here. So I can, for example, on the margin right here, I can actually just choose that and put 100 pixels here, and live make changes, right? If I refresh, it goes away. Same thing as before, non-destructive. It's just in my local copy of the browser. One thing I can also do is I can, grab, let's say I grab this H1. If I want to, I can go ahead and apply an inline style here and see what that would look like. I mean, it's horrible, so I don't want that. But I can see it right there. And if you look over there, you can see it just applies the style right there. That can be very useful when you're trying to tweak and you're kind of annoyed by the whole back and forth. This lets you live edit. Now, there are some ways of hooking up your files to the Chrome DevTools and saving here and doing that. I've never done it, but if you're interested, there are ways of doing it. I tend to, generally though, I like to work in my text editor, so I don't do that. But I do sometimes come in here and just tweak, because that is sometimes, if you're trying to pixel position something and going back and forth and making single pixel changes is very, very annoying. You can do this and just tweak it, get it where you want it, and then go to your text editor and actually make your changes. If you scroll down to the bottom of this, you can see a nice picture of the box model. Now, CSS and everything on the web page, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, everything on a web page is a square. If you give it a border radius and you make it a circle, it doesn't matter. It's still a square. All right, everything's a square, or excuse me, everything's a rectangle on the web. All right, the box model describes how the rectangle works and how everything is sized in both height and width. And the box model basically takes into account in some measure the width of the element, the padding around the edges of the element, the border, which is around the padding, and then the margin, which is around the border. If you want to see some of the settings that are actually applied to the element in the box model, you can scroll down to the bottom and you can actually see the version of the box model. You can also see computed properties. If you don't want to look through the styles and see some of the latest stuff that was applied, you can go to computed and see what are some of the final things that actually got applied. That can also be useful as well. And finally, one thing that I found interesting that I didn't know about until just the other day is if you click on one of the color boxes, it actually gives you a color picker. That sure would have been nice to know, but oh well. So you can click in here, and you can also click, you can make your own custom palettes. You can go look at what are the colors that I have on the page. I have one because my page is boring. Or you can actually pick a material design color palette, of course material design because Google is behind material design and they want to push it. Also with colors, if you ever need to go, what is that color in RGBA or HSLA, you can actually just go through here and it will change it for you and you can see what the values are. Okay?
Have you ever compared this to Safari at all, or ever used a Safari?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm using Safari, but I'm probably going to switch.
Yeah, the Safari DevTools are good. I do like them. I like these a little bit better. When I do use the Safari DevTools is when I have to hook my phone up to debug something on Safari.
What was that?
Which I don't have to do much anymore. But
What's that for?
what's that?
You mentioned.
So the Safari comes with DevTools as well, as does Firefox, as does Internet Explorer. So all the major browsers at this point have built-in DevTools.
I didn't know until I started editing the style sheet and kind of saw it making some changes. I'm like, really cool.
Yeah, they're good. And if you're doing testing stuff with Safari, absolutely use them. Chrome is my go-to though. I've tried some of the other dev tools. I haven't much messed with Firefoxes, but I've tried IEs, but I always come back to Chrome. And these days I don't run Windows as much, and so I don't really have much of a choice of running IE or Edge at that point, even if I want to. So that's the CSS stuff. Anything else about CSS? Okay. Let's talk about debugging for a while. And so I want to show you a little bit of code. Then I want to talk about stacks and stack traces. Some of you will be familiar with that, some of you won't. So we're going to talk through it. So let's see. This is the one I want. Okay, I want to show you a very exciting web page because all I have is very exciting web pages to show you. This is my Chuck Norris joke, random joke generator. Because why not? I actually just gave my students an assignment to make a Chuck Norris random joke generator because I don't only do serious assignments. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty good. So this is some really groovy code. We're going to talk through what debugging this. Like if there was a bug in here, we're going to talk through it. We'll create a bug and we'll see what's going on. So here it is. Let's talk through it and then we'll talk about the idea of stacks. So here we go at the top. I'm getting the get joke button. That's what this top thing is. This is, I know it's not like jQuery or Angular or React. It's just regular DOM stuff. I'm getting the joke button, and then I've got a div where I'm showing the joke whenever I get it. And so then I have my array of jokes. And I purposely broke this into several functions just so we could get a nice little stack trace in here. So I have a function for generating a random number. And what I'm going to do, and here's basically the way this works, is this is an array, and I'm just going to generate a random index out of this array. All right? And so to do that, I just do math.random, which gives you a number between 0 and 0.9999999, repeating. And if you multiply that number by the length of an array and then floor it, you can get a random index for the array. So that's what that does. Now, where's that used? Well, that's used in the getRandomJoke function. So the getRandomJoke gets a random number, which is the index, and then uses that index to pull the joke out. And that happens in an event listener. And so here's the event listener. When you click, gets a random joke, takes that, puts that as text content. Nothing terribly complex here. But let's say, for example, I had a problem. Let's say for some reason I accidentally fat fingered a 10 there. I don't know how I did it. Let's just say I did it. That would cause me issues because I'd get a joke and it's going to send me off the end of the array and it's not going to be working. So how would I dig through it? Well, there are, fortunately, debugging tools in here. There's the Sources tab, and in the Sources tab I can see everything that's loaded into the document. And so I can see here there's my HTML page, my debugging.js file, and my style file. I'm going to click, you can see the things in here. And so I'm going to choose debugging, and I am going to set a breakpoint. Now I want to figure out what's going on whenever I click the button, so maybe the best place to look is the button. So I'm going to set a breakpoint there. You should set a breakpoint on the left there, and you can say, okay, get joke. And at that point, it will step into here. Okay? So I'm going to step into the getRandomJoke function, and then step into the getRandomNumber function, and then I can see that, lo and behold, somebody put a +10 here and is screwing up my beautiful code. Okay? Now, see this over here, this call stack? Let's talk about this basic idea. Okay? For those who are programmers, you're quite used to seeing call stacks. For those of you who are not, maybe not, so let's talk about it. Here's the same basic outline. I have a getRandomNumber function, a getRandomJoke function, and my event listener. Whenever I click, basically what happens is the browser is going to run this JavaScript, and it's going to be like at a particular location. Let's say I put my breakpoint right here. What it's going to do is it's going to stop at that location. And that's going to allow me to do step debugging, which is step through, step in, step out, and things like that. So if I step into this function, what's going to happen is, well, actually before that happens, whenever I click this button, it's going to add an anonymous function to the call stack. All right? Every time a function is called, and we'll see this when we get to the others, every time the function is called, the JavaScript runtime, and this is quite normal for programming languages, will create, add what is called like a stack frame onto the call stack. Any variables that are created can be created within here, and when you call another function, like for example, when it calls getRandomJoke, it's going to add a new frame onto the stack, and if it needs to create any variables, they will be created in there. And then as we step in further, if you create any other variables, they're going to be created in there. And then when you're done, it can start popping frames off the stack. Any variables that are in there can be cleaned up. And then as we go through, any variables there can be cleaned up. And then any variables there can be cleaned up when that's cleaned up. And then you're ultimately done. There's no code running when that stuff, well, none of your code running anyway, when all that stuff has been cleared off the stack. All right? That's a stack trace. As you step through, it's basically allocating little areas of memory. And this can help you, and we'll see this in a number of ways in a minute. If you can understand this stepping into functions, into functions, into functions, this can really help you whenever you get errors. Okay?
How did you get this?
That is Keynote. And I just made that up.
Oh.
Actually, I didn't completely make it up, because that's exactly what it's doing in Chrome Developer Tools. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to do this again, all right? And let me make this a little bit bigger. Close that below, that'll help. Okay, so I'm going to click Get Joke. All right, so let's look at the stack, call stack, here we go. Anonymous. What does it mean anonymous? Well, this is a function right here without a name, and something without a name is anonymous. So that's what that is right there. All right, and so I'm going to step into RandomJoke. Now here's 4 buttons. If I were to push this play button, it would just go ahead and would stop waiting on me. I don't want to do that. If I were to hit this button, this is the step over button. See, stepping over something. Then I would not go into this function. It would just it would happen, but I wouldn't go into it and watch it. So I'm not going to do that. What I want to do is I want to step into the function. So now look over here in the call stack. Now, on top of anonymous function is now getRandomJoke. Okay? So now I'm going to step in once again to getRandomNumber. And if we look at where we are, we can see some interesting things. First of all, we can see any local variables that are around. Like this right now is the window object. Rand, even though I'm right here, has been created but has a value of undefined. Anybody know why it has a value of undefined and has already been created? Those who know JavaScript.
Hoisting?
Hoisting. What's that?
You haven't ran that line yet.
I haven't ran that line yet. But in JavaScript, it has this little strange feature called hoisting, where if even at the bottom of a function you create a variable and assign a value to it, JavaScript will actually hoist the declaration of that variable to the top of its scope and give it an undefined value. So even here, even though I haven't ran the left-hand side here, JavaScript has hoisted and created the variable and is undefined. But whenever you're dealing with code here, what happens on the right does, except for the hoisting, happen what's on the left. And so I call math.random, and then I go one more step, and then now I can see in the debugger what's the value of rand. It is 0.932, and so on. I can also see that over here. If you have particular variables that you care about, you can watch them. So you can, as you can see, I had previously put rand there. If I put index, it's not going to be available because actually index is in a different stack frame and I don't actually have access to it because that's how JavaScript scope works. But if I put in here rand, I can see that there. And so if you want to keep track of something and watch it, that's the purpose of the watch window. And these tools in Chrome, if you're used to any tool that has a debugger, this is going to be familiar to you. So if you learn how to do these things, then you move to something like C# and use the C# debugger, you're going to see watch windows, call stacks, all that kind of stuff. It's very normal for programming languages. I haven't used a programming language that doesn't have call stacks. Maybe they exist. I'm sure they do. I've never used one. This is fairly normal. So anyway, I'm going to move on a little bit. So at this point, I can step on and I can see that my index is 16. Clearly that's wrong, right? Because I only have like 6 or 7 jokes. I can step through now that I've seen that. Oh, and also notice my watch. Index is now available so I can see it, but rand is not available. Okay? So I can step on through. That actually sets the text content to undefined, and we don't see anything, and we're sad. But that gives me a clue. Oh, well, somebody did that. So clearly, I can go in here, remove my breakpoint, and now I get my jokes again. Right? So that's how step debugging works. You can do conditional breakpoints. You might find that useful. One thing I find super useful, and I have another page for this, is if, let's say you're working on something complex and you're not entirely sure what in the application is making a change to the page. This definitely happens when you happen to start working on a new project. Let's say you inherit a project or you start a new job and you're jumping into something and you're like, stuff's happening on this website. I have no idea what's causing this to happen. Here's something you might can use to help. All right, so here I am on this page. If I click this, it changes. So if I want to, I can go searching through all of the code. There's not much code here. But I can go through searching through all the code and find it. Or I could inspect on this dude. And then I can say something like, you ever notice this break on thing down here? Subtree modifications. So now, whenever I click on it, whenever something changes, the debugger will automatically break in the point that anything in the subtree of that changed. And so we can see here, oh, hey, look, it changed. Now I know the spot in the code that did it. I think that's incredibly useful. Similar to that, there's other options, like, for example, if we look at this thing right here, I have a element here that when I click on it, it adds what are theoretically random numbers, though not. Does anybody know where those come from? No? Bucky's keywords in Captain America Civil War. Okay, anyway. What that is just when I click on things, I've got a bunch of words I'm running through. That's all it is. But whenever I click this button, it removes the list from the page. Well, what would I do if I wanted to know, if I saw something getting removed from the page, how would that happen? Well, if I want to, there is a special kind of debugging break on here for node removal. So if that's subtree modifications running right there. If I remove the list, as you can see right here, paused on node removal, and I can see where that happened. And I'm just grabbing the container, which is its parent, and removing the list that way. And so there's ways there which are nice, where I have no idea in the code where this thing is changing. This can be super helpful if you're wanting to do that. Now, if we go over here and look, we'll actually see these here. And so if I want to, I can unclick those, or I can remove the breakpoint here if I want to. Okay? Similar to that, there's Ajax Breakpoints, where if you want to set an Ajax Breakpoint, anytime somebody makes a particular Ajax call, you can actually put like the part of the path in there if you want to get it. Also, in terms of global events, if you want to, let's say, no, this is what I want right here. Like if I want to know anytime there's a click handler firing, I can do that and set it that way. And now when this click listener happens, I'll know about it. So if you ever need something really wide, like I want anything in this page, anytime somebody has a click event listener and it happens, I want to know about it, that's something you can use. And there's lots of things here. There's stuff on the window, touch events, pointer events for the pointer events back and all sorts of things. So that can be pretty handy. Let's see, debugging. Oh, one thing that's useful is if you're in any one of these, we're about to get to the console. If you want to see the console in any one of these, if you just hit escape, the console shows up. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. If you hit escape, it goes back. If you want it there, and if you don't want it there, just make it go away. That's just a little bitty thing. Any questions about debugging or stacks? Stack traces. Okay, well, we're going to see stack traces again right now. Let's talk about the console stuff. All right, so I have a special place for this, and that's my console improvements. In terms of the source code, you might find some of this stuff useful. Let's see. Okay, so let's go to my source code here. Console, I'm going to close all tabs to the left. That's everything. Cool. So I have different types of console. We all know who've ever done any console logging. There you go. It looks like that. It's kind of boring. And right now I'm trying to remember what I did to turn on navigation. Because now I totally want it away because it's annoying me. I'll deal with that later. All right, so that's that log right there. If you want a little more color or variety, there's actually a number of different types of built-in console logging that you can do. Debug warn error info, and they give you some things you might like. Info and log aren't that different. Warn and error give you stack traces, all right? And so there is our, basically our file that we're running right there. This was on line 7. That's not much of a stack trace. You'll see a better one here in a minute. Okay. And so those will give you there. They also give you little icons and things over there on the left, and that's kind of handy. Let's undo that. If that is too plain and boring for you, this one was actually new to me recently. Is you can actually control some of the styling. You guys ever seen that one? And you pass this formatting string, and then you can pass colors, sizes. I'm not sure all what you can do there, and then text. And so then you can actually get some differently formatted text here, which in general would probably be fairly annoying because that's a whole lot of typing just to put something in the console. You can make it a little bit better by doing this. JavaScript is a dynamic language, which means if you want to add your own logging messages to the console, well, just do it. And it's totally fine. So here we go. Here's some examples. I totally stole these from right there. If you want to, for example, make a to-do or an important message, and then use them like that, there you go. Styling. Do those use border, text decoration, underline?
Do you use these yourself?
Only when I have lots of console logs going. Yeah. If you don't have a lot of console logs going, maybe not. Another place this might be useful is if, okay, confession time. You know, sometimes there's places in your app and you're like, I'm sure this code never gets called. But just in case, I'm going to put a console log here, but I'm never expecting to see this. That would be a good time to make it really obvious as well. And then suddenly you're going along, a day later, and just boom, there's something big in red and yellow. You're like, oh, that's that thing I thought that was never getting called. I have to look again at my code. So it can be useful for something like that. And typing this information out would be very, very annoying each time. However, if you do create these little helper methods, you can just have a utilities file that has stuff in it like this, included in your application, then you can use it anywhere, and all you have to do is do console to do, console important. I've just recently started messing around with this though. This is somewhat new to me, like I said. But I have certainly struggled many times with, wow, there's way too many console logs here. What in the world do I do? And this can be a way to differentiate it if you want to. But this is a little bit. All right, so this one is totally fabulous. I've known about this next one for a while. Okay, so let's say you have a list of objects, or an array of objects. Okay? Let's console log this instead of table. So here I have my array of objects. And so you're probably used to this if you've done arrays or console log them. You get this nice ability to dig in and whatnot and see things. If you want to see just individual ones, this is totally great. If you want to see all of them, this can be very annoying. There is a console table, if you want, where if you refresh this, instead of actually having the drill down list, it will give you a tabular view of this. Okay? This can be super handy if you have a big list and you want to jump into things and see what's all of the data. It's already built into Chrome. I think it's supported by Firefox too. But it's just console log, change it to console table, and you've got it. Yeah.
You're going to share this?
Yes. Yeah. This is the only file that has source code I think worth seeing. Yeah, that's pretty useful. Another thing you can do is if you have a large object, you can actually filter down to the properties you want. You just do console.table and pass an array of the fields that you want. And now I just get first name and last name, even though there's other things. So that could be pretty handy. If you do lots of API calls, you're probably used to getting lots of big arrays of data, and this can be a great way of looking at the kind of stuff that you've got back. So that's super duper handy. All right. No more need for that. Let's talk stack traces again. So here's a bit of really cool code. I have a function called 1 that calls a function called 2. And here's the function called 2 that calls the function called 3. And inside the function called 3, I call console.trace so I can see what the stack trace is. So here we go. There it is. Well, this is the file, which is calling an anonymous function, which calls the 1 function, which calls the 2 function, which calls the 3 function. That's where I did my console trace. And so therefore, I see the stack trace there. Okay? So if you want to see a call stack, you can get it just by doing console trace. You don't even have to debug. And for those who've used call stacks, you know that sometimes you can get to a certain place in code through multiple paths. If you want to know various paths that, for example, a piece of code is being accessed by, stack traces can be a great way of doing it. Because any functions that are on the way to getting to that piece of code will show up in the stack trace. And so this can be super duper handy. So let's see. All right. I really want to know what's preserving my log here. There it is right there. Okay, gone. Boom. All right.
What does that do? Sorry. Preserve log.
Preserve log. So what you have in the console log by default is only what's happening on a particular page. If you change pages, all the console log and everything will be wiped out. Okay. Preserve log will actually preserve your console logs from page to page. Most of the time you don't want that. This can be really useful, like for example, if you have an action, let's say you have a form, and you're trying to prevent default on the form, and that form is going to do a form post. Well, if there's an error in your JavaScript and it can't do that prevent default, and you hit that submit button, it's going to go ahead and do the form post. It'll show the error, but it'll be gone immediately, and you'll never see your JavaScript error. And so you've been posted off to somewhere, and you're like, there's something wrong with my code, and I can't find it. This right here can be really useful for that scenario, because then it'll preserve it over multiple pages, and really all you need is to the next page, so you can say, oh, I had a JavaScript error in this location. I actually got to use this with my students, because they were having issues with this very issue when we were messing around with forms. Okay, so that was that. Now, in terms of if you ever want to time something, I'll just go ahead and admit and say I've never actually done this for reals. But if you ever do need to time something, if you do console.time, do some things, and then console time end, maybe you'll find that useful.
Do they have an intelligence?
What's that?
Intelligence for console? I mean
The italics?
intelligence.
IntelliSense?
Yeah.
Oh. I don't think so. Let's see. Yeah. Didn't think that.
Right, code code does have some. Don't you have to add? I think you have to do an add-on to code. Isn't that code?
No, this is add-on. Generally speaking, yeah, you got to add stuff to code. Sometimes it'll see what language you're in and just say, hey, you're doing C#. You should add C# support. And so it's really easy to do it. But I start with add-on with my stuff. Okay, so this one is interesting. When you really can't change the source code, maybe this is a little bit more interesting than it is. But there is a monitor function that will allow you to basically notify you anytime a function is called. All right. So I'll show you how this works. All right. The thing I want to monitor is this this function right here. Doesn't take any parameters. Doesn't matter. It's called in two different ways. One, 5 seconds after the page loads, I pass a string and number and an object. And also here, whenever I click on the monitor this div. And so the syntax is monitor this. And you don't put this in your source code. What you do is you do this. So I'm going to go back here and refresh. And after 5 seconds, that thing is firing. So what I can do is I can do monitor. What did I call it? Call this. Not all this. Call this. All right. So now, anytime someone calls that function, like for example, when you click on that, it will not only fire that that you were monitoring, it also will give you the arguments that were passed. It doesn't give you them as objects, so you can't like drill into them here. As you can see, it's just mouse event. Like what every time an event listener fires. Whenever you do add event listener for something, it's always passing an event object, tell you like the X, Y, where you are when you click, or like if it's a DOM event, like a mouse event, like what element you're clicking on. That's all in this. I can't see them at this point, but I do see that it was passed. So now I'm going to refresh for the timeout, and I can go down here and hit up to get my last one, and we'll see here in a second or two. I will see there's my high, my 7, and my object. Once again, I can't drill into this object. This is kind of unfortunate about the monitor, but you can at least see the simple types that are passed in. So if you've got access to the source code and can change it easily, then probably the easiest thing to do would be console.log and just log the arguments. So that would be easier because the arguments keyword will give you anything that's passed to it. So give it a few seconds. And this is better because you actually will be able to drill in. Or in this case, there's the mouse event. So, that's better. But if you don't have access to the source code, or you're not entirely sure where it is, or whatever, you can do this. It's one of those, maybe you'll find it useful kind of things, okay? All right. Console, I think that's it there. Any questions?
So how did you add that monitor thing again? Sorry.
I just typed it in here. Yeah, it's not something you put in your code, because if you're in your code, it would just be better to put a console log. Yeah, but if you're out here and you want to monitor something, that's just something built in. Yeah.
So you could use it for some code that you did not write up.
Yeah.
Like an Amazon.
Yeah.
I have a weird question. I'm new to programming, okay?
Sure.
And let's say that you create a really big company. You get really high. Let's say you start making good things, right? Like these companies like Facebook. Like what are the tools that they're using when they're building are they using the same stuff, or are they just like creating their own tools, creating their own developer tools, or not using any of this? I'm just curious how different of the world they're in programming from somebody just starting.
The web developers who work at the big companies are using this. Yeah. Like I saw a presentation once by one of the developers at Twitter, one of those big companies. It was on this. Really good presentation. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons why they did this was to solve the development problem. Initially when there was no tools like this, all they had was IE.
Alert boxes.
Alert
Hey,
box.
but that's so annoying. That's like the worst thing.
So the developers got mad and they started building the tools.
Firebugs were the first Firefox. That was probably one of the first real development tools.
That's the first one I used. That just totally changed my web developer life. I'm like, wow, this is really great. I remember when that came out. That was really exciting. And I used that for a long time until the Chrome developer tools came out. And I like these a little bit. Firebug, which I think is now a deprecated program.
Do you know if there's any way when you have a callback to know where it got registered if it fires? Because once the callback is fired, there's no stacking.
Well, let's see. In the callback example that I did have, I knew where, let's see if I know where in the page that is. I think it did. No, not that one. It was, yeah, it was in this one. All right, so let's see. Sources. Here, so this is a callback for an event listener. Let's see. My stack shows me it's going to show me my current, here it is. It's going to show me my current location with the 24 with the line number. It's not showing me like where internal to the browser that's coming from. So that's not showing me that there. I don't know.
It's a callback on the event. It's a callback on some other processing stuff. Function call, it'll show a stack.
Like if you build your own sort of event library or something like that. I guess if it's still showing up. I can't really say. But yeah, this isn't going to show me the internals for whatever stuff is behind at event listener.
Well, I mean, if you want it to be, I mean, I know what you probably want the forensics, but behind the scenes, this is an anonymous function. They don't want to know anything that happened. That's one of the
If
reasons.
you're in a chain of
Right.
promises, right, with thens and stuff, it doesn't know where it came from.
Well, let's go to a I do actually have a promise example. Let's go take a look at it. This is in Ajax. Let's see, here's my done function. So let's go check that out. Alright, let's see what our stack trace is right here. Make the Ajax call. I am actually getting at least a callback, call stack back into jQuery at this point. So here's mine, and that's jQuery's call stack. So, I mean, I'm seeing something. I don't know if that helps.
Oh, that's not what it was.
This is different? Okay. Sorry, I can't help it. Let's see.
So I got a question. So you should be able to see all of the code that comes into the client, right? Like all the CSS, JavaScript, and all that in the tools. But what about server side? Can you see any of that? I mean, that's what I thought too. But
Yeah. The web is kind of unique in that for things to happen in the browser, you have to actually ship all the source code, right? Not the server-side source code, but all the actual HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Fortunately for all developers, that's not the case for server-side, because that's certainly something we actually wouldn't want, because it's terribly hard to obfuscate things really well. It's impossible to completely obfuscate things when you ship them across the web to people. By doing that distinction, it's actually really nice for us. But no, there's really no way of really getting to the server side. Unless you hack
I
their
was thinking
server.
about security because, you know, just thinking like, how do hackers, I mean, I was thinking maybe that's what they use.
No, they have to go through some other way. Some vulnerability in the web server, the framework stack, you know, WordPress is famous for things like that. The operating system itself. I am not a hacker and cannot give you any useful information there. That's not me.
You're a smart guy.
I wish I could, much cooler than I am. What else?
Could this be used in .NET code?
So no, you wouldn't use this in .NET code. What you would just use the .NET debugger, which is better than this. So yeah, definitely just use the .NET debugger. But you can use this for Node. if you're going to do node debugging. But no, just use Visual Studio Debugger. I personally think I like it better than the Debugging Tools. Yes? Okay. Okay. Moving along. Network tab. This is one of my favorite tabs. Console is probably my favorite. Network would be my second favorite because I always want to see what's happening, especially with my Ajax calls. So since I have this one open, this was my example page for this. The network tab will basically tell you all of the network-based requests that are going on. And so in this particular case, on the subject of source code shipping, we have my HTML file, we have style sheet, the Ajax.js file, which is just my little Ajax example, jQuery itself, and then this is the API call I made to the GitHub API. And so if you ever want to dig into things, you totally can. So you can click on here and see things like, for example, this general sections, it's like a mixture of request and response headers. But anyway, so it's status code, where you're going, and then if you want to, you can look at the actual response headers. Like, for example, access control origin, I just had to teach my students about that as they started calling APIs that they couldn't get to from the browser. And then, of course, there's also down here the request headers that you're sending, or if you want to see any query string parameters, or if you have a post and you want to see the content of the post, you can see that down there. You can also see in some of the information that comes back. So what came back from my API call to the GitHub API, well, this is actually all the JSON that returned from that. This can be incredibly useful. Now this can also be a nice debugging tool for the browser. So for example, if you're like, I wonder if Amazon has many HTTP requests for their page. I don't know, let's see. Let's see. Okay, 388 until in about a second or two you'll see another one. Yeah, there it is. So every time it changes up here, they actually do a tracking call, so they'll know that you actually saw an impression of that ad. So here we go. We're at 400-ish requests to view this page. This is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all sorts of things. Now, one thing you might find very useful is this part right here. This is a timeline of the requests. Whenever you go to a web page, the very first thing that downloads is the HTML file, all right? And then from there on, but when it starts parsing that HTML file, it can see CSS files and JavaScript files and start downloading those. And then sometimes those JavaScript files or CSS files might reference other things, which then causes them to get downloaded. And of course, the browser can only download a certain number of things at a time. And so you get this tree of, this cascade of downloading stuff, downloading more stuff over time. And of course, the bigger the images, the longer things are going to take. The more requests, the longer it's going to take for your browser to download everything. And of course, in terms of your speed, that's going to affect things too. I mean, it downloaded it pretty quickly right there, but I'm a Sprint user, and Sprint has basically the worst performance ever. And so I actually created a Sprint bad throttle so you can throttle things and see how things are going. It didn't download this yet. It's still just loading the HTML and just hasn't refreshed the page yet. It has downloaded the page, and this is what it feels like on my phone anytime I use the internet and I'm not on Wi-Fi. All right. And so if you want to, you can of course have different built-in speeds. Like here's a good 3G connection, and suddenly it's going to be going a lot faster, or Wi-Fi, or just unthrottled. This can be really useful when you want to do testing on your web page, like for example, when you have someone who accidentally puts a 11 megabyte splash image on the page, right? Okay, that's useful. You can see that a little bit better when you throttle, because it might come in pretty quickly if you don't, but if you throttle that down, it's going to be really obvious when that thing doesn't show up. So that can be really useful. The network tab also can let you do some other things that are pretty cool. You can filter down to particular requests, like you can get just the PNGs, for example. You can also filter this way. I only want the Ajax request, or the JavaScript files, or the CSS files, or the fonts. Only one. No app manifest. All right, or all of them. Okay. You can hide the data URLs. That's when people embed data inside the URL, so it'll basically not be a download or something. It'll just immediately be there within the payload. You can hide those if you want to. You can pretend you're offline. That's a little bit easier than turning off your Wi-Fi. Why would you do that? Well, if you were doing application app manifest stuff and trying to build an offline web app, that can be useful. Disable cache is also basically the best thing, because if you are working on something where there is some like CSS caching and you want to see your CSS changes in a timely manner, that can be very useful. And preserve log, this is the same thing as what I was dealing with earlier. If you want to see the log across multiple jumps on the network, that can be super duper great. If you don't think the timeline's useful, you can't hide it. And that's handy. All right? Oh, also, one of two places, two that I know of, where you can capture screenshots. So let's hit Command R and see this happening. So as things are downloaded into the page, your page is, as you probably noticed, the page will sometimes change how it looks as things pop into the page. We're still recording? Come on, there we go. Okay, so we can actually see, at first it looked like this, and then it looked like this, and then it looked like this, and so on and so forth. That can be super handy as you see what's somebody going to see at 1 second versus 2 seconds and so on. That's nice. So let's see.
How do you get that?
This button here.
Command?
What's that?
You said there was a command.
It's just this button right here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. There might be a command, I'm not sure. All right, let's see. Is there anything else on this I want to talk about? No. Any questions about that?
What happened to waterfall?
What's that?
Waterfall.
Yeah, the waterfall of the this depends on this, depends on this, depends on this kind of thing. Yes?
Is there a way to push this into the console log so that if I have to take a copy of the console log to observe how the speed was?
I don't know the answer to that. Like if you want to basically record this to a file somewhere or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly handy when you're in a mobile device.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Can't Command A to select those things. I'm not sure. You might. Has anybody ever tried that? All right. I'm just going to get one thing out of the way. Security tab. Never used it. So I can't really comment on it. But Amazon has a valid certificate. It's important. Let's talk about performance. I can poke around in here. I know some things about this. This is not where I'm the strongest. This, by the way, is that second place you can do the screenshots, right? So let's grab memory, but I don't want to do this here. I want to do this somewhere else. So let's see. Node, kick. Okay. All right, so this is a game that me and a few friends made. Let's see. It involves lots of canvas and lots of little things on the page. You can't hardly see them. Let's, just in case you didn't know you could do this, you can take the Chrome DevTools out. So let me go back and I'm going to refresh. That's not it. That's it right there. Okay. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to refresh this, and then I'm going to play a little bit and look at the performance. All right. Of course, I'm going to play because I like my game, and of course those are bots. So as somebody gets exploded, there's lots of little dots and little pieces, and that'll be relevant here in a minute. So, destroying bots, totally destroying bots. They can't beat me. All right. Oh, yeah, they beat me. Sweet. Nope. Let's go take a look at this. All right. We made that for a node knockout. That's fun. All right. This is absolutely information overload, first of all. This is trying to combine some of the things you've seen in other places. Like there is a network waterfall right here, though that's not useful on this particular application. You can see CPU here. You can also see frames per second, and sometimes that's really important. the browser shoots for 60 frames a second kind of rendering. The red here shows like page jank, so if it's really bad, you're going to get some notifications right there. Here is the screenshots bit. Let's see. One of the interesting things about the interface here, if you're in this area of the interface, if you swipe up and down on your trackpad, I have no idea what this does in Windows. I guess it's similar with just a mouse. I don't know. But if you do that, you narrow the area and lets you dig into something. So that's kind of nice. And then if you do left and right, you move it around. So if I want to look and see what was going on right here in this section, it's just kind of hard. Right there. Oh, I guess I'm getting smaller than that. Okay, so I'm going to stop messing around with that and see what I can find. You can see where the browser's doing things. Here in terms of some of your, oh, I can make it smaller there, that's fantastic. Okay, sweet. Here's a garbage collection cycle right there. You can see where various functions are firing and where it's spending its time during this. And down here you have a color coding of what things are, what's going on. You've got, I guess this is down rendering, and then painting would be whenever the actual paint happens to the page. Loading versus scripting, and I think scripting is actually your code when that's running. Now, one thing in terms of memory is, I'm pretty sure, let's zoom back out and get this whole thing. I'm pretty sure this has a memory leak. And I've talked to Amir about this, and he thinks there might be we use Pixie.js for this. Or at least his version, he uses Pixie.js. He thinks there might be actually a memory leak in Pixie.js around the particles that happen when you explode. And so the memory does kind of keep growing. Occasionally it gets cleaned up, but at least that's the theory. You can also go down here and see where in code, and let me see if I can bring this up a little bit at least. Some of the time is being spent. Like I said, this is not some place where I've spent a lot of time, so I can't say much. But I would say go in here and check things out and take a look around. I wish I could help more there, but I just don't spend that much time profiling applications. And by the way, if you look and do for any documentation online or presentations, some of these things did rename in Chrome 58. Performance used to be timeline, so if you see timeline, that would be useful. If you have a Chrome open right now and you're messing around with things, you see timeline, which probably just go to settings, or just restart your browser, you'll probably get the new version. Memory does some of this memory allocation stuff as well. I do want to talk application. This is something I will go to fairly frequently. And so I don't want to do this on NodeKick. That's not very interesting. It is very interesting if you go to Amazon. You can see all sorts of things that they're doing. All right. You know what? I'll just keep it out. So there's lots of, basically, if you think about the application area, think about things that are kind of stored. Like, for example, if there's an app manifest and some things are being stored for offline usage, they should be here. They don't use that manifest. Things for service workers, never done anything for service workers, so you can actually see all sorts of service workers from other sites if you do that. Now, as a general rule, in terms of if you think about storage, storage is kept at a domain level. And so, for example, if you put something in local storage, somebody from another domain, they can't read it. Put something in a cookie, something from somebody from another domain, they can't read it. And you'll see that when you look in here. So if we look in local storage, we'll actually see that different domains that Amazon uses, or in this case, Google Syndication, are actually putting stuff in local storage. And you can see the keys and values there on the right. Local storage is, it's essentially holding the strings over here. And so you've got, here's the keys, here's the values, and this is something from, I guess, their US East data center, an image CDN, and whatnot. These domains don't have anything stored, but their main Amazon one certainly does. Google Syndication apparently wants to store all sorts of stuff. So local storage is essentially a persistent key value store that you can use. If you want a less persistent key value store, you can use something called session storage. If you, like for example, you want something that'll go away after someone closes a tab, session storage is the thing that you want. If you want something that lasts longer, local storage. That should last until someone clears their local storage. The session storage is fairly transient. And it's the same thing. It's key value pairs. There's Web SQL, which you absolutely should not use. caniuse.com, Web SQL database. With this much read, unless you're building an app for Chrome and Safari only, you probably shouldn't use Web SQL. If you want to use IndexedDB, which I haven't used yet because last time I thought about using it, there was still too much red on the board. There's some iffy things. There's not full support or bugginess and some IE and Chrome features. So
That's the problem with the internet.
what's that?
That's the problem with the whole internet.
There's lots of problems in the internet. Yet, it's pretty amazing. All right, where were we? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So Web SQL and IndexedDB, if you store something there, you can get access to them. Apparently, I guess there's nothing there for them. Cookies. Of course, this is really common. Cookies, they are stored in a domain basis. You can see that here. And you could like do subdomains and whatnot. So that's very useful to show there. There we go. Okay. So you can see the values that are in the cookies, the names of the cookies and whatnot. If you want to, you can delete your cookies. And hopefully I'm not logged off on Amazon now. I think that was a tracking thing, so that's totally fine. So that's another very useful thing. If you're building an app that uses local storage and session storage, this is where I would often go to delete things so that I could, I put the wrong thing in there, I'm going to go here and delete it. And that's a good way of resetting your stuff or doing your testing. Let's see. Page 2. Any questions at this point while I build suspense by changing pages?
So the Web SQL is, what's that?
Basically, it's a relational database built into the browser that several browser developers decided they didn't want to do. Yeah, so you probably shouldn't do it. IndexedDB is more like a Mongo type database, key value document type store. Better supported, but not apparently great. Never used it, so don't know. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is audits. So if I want to go, I want to go to my website so we can see what it says that's bad about my website. So, of course, because I mean, if I had a horrible score, I mean, I wouldn't show you this, obviously. But let's see here. Reload the page. I mean, I have a decent score. I have some red, bad, but it's not too bad. So I don't feel horrible about it. But if you go to Amazon, let's see. Compare myself to Amazon. Okay, let's say edit, run. Okay, it's running the audit. Oh, they got a lot more red than me. Jeez, we're horrible web developers there. It's horrible. Anyway, going back to my rather lame self. I keep doing Command Tab, hoping it will send me here, and it never does. Yet I keep doing it. Okay, leverage browser caching. This can tell you that, you know what, it would be nice to have cache expiration on these, and actually that makes sense. Like this file has been there and hasn't changed for several years. I could probably cache that dude, and that's true for a number of things. There, good, totally good advice. Minimize cookie size. I'm using cookies? I don't know. I am using a plugin for comments on my post. That uses cookies, so I can blame this guest. Serve static content from a cookieless domain. That is far too much trouble for my personal site. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. Specify image dimensions. Okay, sure. Optimize the order of styles and scripts. Yeah, that's pretty minor. Remove unused CSS rules. Okay. there's some CSS I don't use on this page. But this is problematic because this is, well, 63% of the CSS isn't used on this page. But I know for a fact that some of that is used on other pages. So can't quite just go delete all that CSS. That would definitely have some negative effects on things. So, okay. So that's audits, security, like I said, never used it. Application, use this a lot. This is super handy if you're using local storage and cookies. Memory, okay, you can take snapshots of everything that's in memory. If you've ever, this is like basically doing like a WinDebug dump or something like that on the Windows side. You can see all sorts of things, arrays, objects that are created and whatnot. I haven't ever really had to do a lot of memory-based performance on the web, so I can't really help you much on that. The performance thing we're looking at, that's what used to be the timeline. That was the too much information page. Network, easy to use, super handy. Sources, you can actually see any of the sources here. I usually only come here when I'm debugging, usually. Console, apparently somebody needs to get rid of that. I'm going to talk to that developer. And then the elements page. Spend a good time here. So that's the base. That's how you use the Chrome developer tools, at least for the most part. Yes.
I know there's a way that you can actually change from browser to mobile devices.
Oh yeah, if you choose this dude. So this gets you into this mobile mode and allows you here, for example, to pick particular phones and take a look at it. What, for example, my round face would look like on iPhone 5 or something like that. Yeah, this is nice. Some people like it. I tend to just yank the browser in when I'm being responsive. I guess I'm just a creature of habit. But, some people do like this feature. Yeah.
Small question: when you put code and notes, I mean, when you put comments around your code, so does it just not read it? And I mean, I'm trying to explain it. It doesn't. I know it doesn't execute it, but does it just completely ignore it? Like, doesn't see it, or does it? I'm trying to figure out, like, would it speed up? How can I say this? Would it slow down the program if you still put it in there and put comments around it, or is it better just to not have it there? Do you know what I mean? Or is it just completely invisible?
I'm going to say it depends. Like if you, let's say you're doing a server-side language like C#, and you put comments in there, there's nothing you need to do. That is not going to slow down your performance, because that's never, when it goes from the source code to the intermediate language to running, that's not going to make it even that far. So no, that will have like zero effect. Okay. In the browser, comments in like a JavaScript file are not going to affect runtime performance. Like your code's not going to execute any slower because there's comments there. It will affect download size. And so that does affect your performance. And so typically what people do is they don't go, oh, no comments. At least hopefully not. What they'll typically do is you can have basically you have your code and then you have a post-processing step. So it's very annoying to develop a large web application with all the code in one file, right? That's like basically the worst way to do it. But browsers work way better if, for example, you give it one JavaScript file download than if you give it a few hundred. And so developers generally come up with a post-process build way of doing this, where whenever you say, okay, I'm ready for this to be done, you execute something. It takes all the source files, it concatenates them, it removes the comments out of the files, and then you can even remove a lot of the white space to even shrink down the size even more. And then you can even run other things on it that will analyze your code and shrink down variable names to make it even smaller. And ultimately, then you can then put that on the web server. And then, of course, the web server can, whenever you can have gzip enabled, which will even shrink it further before it goes across the wire. And so there's lots of ways of handling it. But yeah, comment your code, but then look at some sort of build process. So look at something like Gulp, or I'm a Gulp guy, or Webpack, or depending on your context, there's going to be tools for this, because this is a common problem, a known problem that's been around for forever. Basically, just about any development environment will have some way, or 40 different ways and tools of handling that. So yeah, so look for words to look for would be like minification. Yeah. That would be the kind of thing you'd look for. Comments would be one of those first things that would be minified.
Hard to debug minified code.
It is hard to debug minified code. But what's the best way of dealing with debugging minified code? Anybody know? Source maps. And so what you can do with source maps is basically source maps are for whenever you take your code and then you compile it to something, and if you run the, not compile, minified it, what source maps do is those get generated during the minification process and are files that can be alongside the minified files, where if they're there, they basically are used by the browser to map from your minified files to your normal source code. So if you're, for example, a Sass user and you're not even writing CSS, you're writing Sass instead, well, you can use source maps with Sass so that in the browser, when you, let's say, inspect something, because Chrome knows about source maps, when you inspect something and you look to see where that is, it'll actually show you where this stuff is in the Sass file and not just in the CSS file.
Where does it read the source map file from?
So whenever you generate, it'll generate in a comment at the bottom of the file generally a URL to the source map. And so if, for example, you're running the Chrome Developer Tools and it sees that URL, it'll try to download it. If it can download it, then it'll use the source map. Now, if you don't deploy that to the web, or if you just strip that out of it, then the source maps won't ever fire, and those mappings won't happen. Yes?
How do you keep your breakpoint from wipe out after refresh?
They don't wipe out after refresh.
It does after refresh, and
Sure.
the breakpoints all went away. I mean, at least that's my experience in
What
West.
route? Chrome?
Yeah.
Up to Css.
So here we go. I'll go to source. I'll set this here. If I refresh, I mean, it's still there. So if I make the Ajax call, that still stops. And then if I refresh and do it again, it still stops there. So.
Can you refresh your URL? Yeah. Just rerun that. Will that go away?
Now, if I open up a new tab, let's see. I would expect that to go away because I closed the Chrome Developer Tools. No, that's actually still there too.
Probably some setting.
Could be.
Make that persist.
I don't know of anything that would do that, but it is possible.
Because in my case, it's always went away after I refresh. Reload the website.
It's kind of interesting, right? Like, what if the page itself has completely changed? Right?
In what
then-
sense?
Like, for example, the script that you have put a breakpoint may not even be there in the after refresh.
Well, if you refresh and you change the source code, let's see what's going to happen. All right. I mean, if you change the source code, it's going to re-download a new version of it.
Right.
So let's just put a lot of spaces and see if it can. Often it can figure out where to put it. So here we go. I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, I guess when it refreshes the file, it gets rid of it. Are you changing your file?
No, it was a JavaScript program that generates the web page.
Okay. I don't know. It sounds like a different situation.
They'll be there, but they'll end up on a different line because you do things with the breakpoints.
I don't know. What else?
Just real quick, your question about getting stack traces on promise chains. I haven't used it, but I just looked it up real quick. There's the async checkbox there. That's what that's meant to address.
Okay.
It's supposed to improve the stack trace for asynchronous calls.
Thank you. I've never used it. Thank you. Anything else?
So on the same question, typically in your, not on the web tools, but in other IDEs, you are always, you have an environment that you have set up to debug and stuff, and you typically go back to the same thing over and over again. You might put different breakpoints, but you have a similar setup and preferences and things like that. So is there anything similar to that? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I'm following you. Like I know, like for example, C# and Visual Studio do a better job of remembering where
Right.
breakpoints are.
Right.
And that's probably just a maturity of the debugging tools, because Microsoft has had really good debugging tools for a very long time. Because I'm quite used to there, you hit enter above a function, and that breakpoint's just going to go with it.
Right. Like it's almost like you want for Amazon. Let's say that you are debugging. I mean, it's not a practical example. Let's say that you are debugging Amazon and Google and something else, and you want it to remember Amazon stuff every time you go there, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, we've been going a while. It's 8:30, hour and a half. So I'll stick around for questions about whatever. So anything you want to say, Steve?
No, I guess that's it. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, cool.